Claire adjusted the rearview mirror, her reflection revealing tired but determined eyes. She parked her car a safe distance from the apartment building, her heart pounding against her chest. The night was cold, but Claire barely felt it, too focused on the task at hand. Hours earlier, she had received an anonymous message: "If you want to know the truth about your husband, go to the address below at 8 p.m. Initially, Claire hesitated. Her marriage to Ethan was perfect, or at least she thought it was. But doubt, once planted, grew quickly. Now, sitting in her car, Claire watched the entrance to the building. The clock said 7:55 p.m. when a family car pulled up. Claire held her breath as she saw Ethan leave, stealthily glancing around before entering the building. There must be an explanation, Claire muttered to herself, but her hands shook as she opened the car door. With hesitant steps, she approached the building. A woman was leaving at that moment, allowing Claire to enter without having to ring the intercom. In the elevator, Claire pressed the button for the 4th floor, remembering the instructions in the message. In the silent hallway, Claire stopped in front of apartment 402. Muffled voices were coming from inside. Heart racing, she leaned in to hear better. "Ethan, we have to be more careful," a female voice said. "What if Claire finds out?" "Don't worry, Lisa," Ethan's voice replied. "Claire doesn't suspect anything. She trusts me completely." The words hit Claire like a punch in the gut. Lisa. The name was familiar, an old university classmate of Ethan's. Claire staggered back, feeling dizzy. Without thinking, she knocked on the door loudly. The silence that followed was deafening. After a few moments, the door opened, revealing a pale and shocked Ethan. "Claire? What are you doing here?" Claire looked past him, seeing Lisa standing in the middle of the room, looking equal parts surprised and guilty. "So that's it?" Claire asked, her voice shaking with anger and pain. "All this time?" Ethan tried to reach her, but Claire backed away. "Claire, I can explain." "Explain what, Ethan? How have you betrayed our trust, our marriage?" Tears began to fall down Claire's face. She turned and ran to the elevator, ignoring Ethan's desperate calls. Somehow, Claire managed to drive back home, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. When she arrived, the house was dark and silent, a perfect reflection of how she felt inside. Claire barely slept that night. When morning came, she got up, determined to confront Ethan. But before he could do that, he heard voices coming from his office. "You're a fool, Ethan." Ethan's Uncle Robert's voice sounded irritated. "First you ruined Claire's father's company, and now this." Claire froze, barely breathing as she continued to listen. "Uncle, I had no choice," Ethan replied, his voice strained. "Claire's father was going to expose everything. I had to protect the family." "What now? How are you going to protect the family from this scandal?" Claire backed away, horrified. Not only was Ethan cheating on her, but could he also be responsible for her father's death? It was too much to process. When Ethan left the office, he found Claire standing in the hallway, pale and shaking. "Claire? Did you hear?" "Every word," she replied, her voice cold as ice. "It's over, Ethan. I want a divorce." Ethan's face paled. "Claire, please let me explain. It's not what you think." "Isn't it?" "So tell me, Ethan, what exactly am I supposed to be thinking? That my husband not only cheats on me, but could also be responsible for my father's death?" Ethan tried to get closer, but Claire backed away. "Don't touch me. I don't want to hear any more lies." "Please, Claire," Ethan begged. "Give me a chance to explain. There's a lot more to this story than you know." Claire closed her eyes, trying to control her emotions. Part of her wanted to scream, cry, throw things. But another part, the rational part, knew he needed to remain calm. "Okay," she said finally. "You have 5 minutes." Ethan took a deep breath. "The company is undergoing an audit. If we announce our divorce now, it could complicate things. Please, Claire, give me a month. After that, if you still want a divorce, I won't contest it." Claire stared at him in disbelief. "Do you really think you can fix this in a month?" "No," Ethan answered honestly. "But I can try to explain. And maybe we can salvage something from all this." Claire thought for a moment. Did she still love Ethan? The pain in his chest suggested so, but could I trust him again? A month, she said finally. But I'm going to work at the company during this time. I want to see for myself what's going on. Ethan nodded, looking relieved and apprehensive at the same time. Thank you, Claire. I promise I'll explain everything. In the days that followed, Claire moved into the guest room and began working as a designer at Ethan's company. It was there that she met Lisa again, now as her co-worker. The first meeting was tense. Lisa tried to act as if nothing had happened, but Claire could feel the contempt in every look, every word. Claire, Lisa said with a fake smile. What a surprise to see you here. I hope we can work well together. Claire maintained her composure, responding with a calmness she didn't feel. Of course, Lisa. After all, we're all professionals here, aren't we? The weeks passed slowly. Claire dedicated herself to her work, trying to ignore the pitying looks from some colleagues and the whispers in the corridors. Ethan tried to get closer, but she kept her distance, still uncertain about her feelings. It was during this period that Claire began to feel strange. Morning nausea, extreme tiredness. At first she chalked it up to stress, but a visit to the doctor confirmed her suspicions she was pregnant. And the news hit her like lightning. A baby. Her and Ethan's son. Claire cried that night, conflicted between the joy of being a mother and the fear of the uncertain future. She has decided to keep the pregnancy a secret for now. He needed to plan his next move. The month was almost over, and she still didn't know if she could forgive Ethan, if she could trust him again. Meanwhile, at work, Lisa continued her subtle teasing. Claire maintained her dignity, focusing on her work and ignoring Lisa's attempts to destabilize her. One night, alone at home, Claire placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "Don't worry, little one," she whispered. "Mommy will take care of you no matter what." Claire took a deep breath before entering Ethan's office. The month of waiting was over, and she was determined to get answers. When she opened the door, she found not only Ethan but also her mother-in-law, Elizabeth, sitting elegantly on the leather sofa. "Claire," dear Elizabeth said with a cold smile. "Glad you could join us." Claire felt a shiver run down her spine. Elizabeth's presence never meant anything good. "What's going on?" Claire asked, looking from Ethan to Elizabeth. Ethan looked uncomfortable. "Claire, my mother ... she knows about our situation." "And I must say," Elizabeth interrupted, "that I am deeply disappointed in you both. A divorce? In this family?" Claire felt anger rising inside her. "With all due respect, Elizabeth, this is between Ethan and me." Elizabeth stood up, her gaze sharp. "Your mistake, dear. Everything that affects this family concerns me, especially when it threatens our business." Before Claire could respond, Ethan intervened. "Mom, please. I asked you not to interfere." Elizabeth snorted. "Someone needs to talk some sense into that head. Claire, do you really think you can survive without this family? Without our name, our money?" The words hit Claire like a slap. "I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself, Elizabeth, and my son." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan looked at Claire, shocked. "Son? Claire, are you?" Claire nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm pregnant, Ethan. I found out a few weeks ago." Elizabeth looked momentarily stunned but soon recovered. "Well, that changes everything, doesn't it? Claire, you can't deprive this child of his family, of his legacy." "Enough," Claire shouted, surprising everyone, including herself. "I didn't come here to be manipulated or threatened. I came for answers, Ethan. About my father, about Lisa, about everything." Ethan looked at his mother. "Could you give us a moment, please?" Elizabeth hesitated, but finally left, but not before giving Claire a warning look. Alone, Ethan approached Claire, his eyes full of emotion. "Why didn't you tell me about the baby?" Claire backed away. "How could I, Ethan? With everything that's going on." Ethan sighed deeply. "Claire, I know I made terrible mistakes, but you need to know the truth about your father." Over the next few minutes, Ethan revealed a story that shook Claire to the core. His father had apparently discovered irregularities at Ethan's company shortly before his death. But it wasn't Ethan who was responsible, it was his uncle, Robert. Robert had been embezzling funds for years, Ethan explained. Your father found out and threatened to expose everything. The night he died, Robert was there. Claire felt her legs weaken. Ethan held her, guiding her to the couch. What about Lisa? Claire asked, her voice shaking. Ethan looked down. Lisa, she's working with Robert. They blackmailed me, Claire. They threatened to expose family secrets if I didn't cooperate. Claire processed everything slowly. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I wanted to protect you, Ethan said softly. And I was afraid of losing you. At that moment, a knock on the door interrupted the conversation. It was Lisa, looking strangely nervous. Sorry to interrupt, but Claire, you need to see this. Lisa handed Claire a folder. Inside were drawings, Claire's drawings for a new project. Someone is claiming you plagiarized these designs, Lisa explained. They're demanding your resignation. Claire looked at Ethan, shocked. Do you believe that? Ethan looked equally surprised. Of course not. Claire, I know your work. This is clearly a setup. In the days that followed, Claire was plunged into a battle to prove her innocence. She worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and witnesses to prove the originality of her designs. During this time, Claire also received a disturbing call from her adoptive mother, Sarah. Claire, darling, Sarah said, her voice shaking. We need to talk. It's about your adoption. Claire's world seemed to crumble even more. First Ethan's betrayal, then the revelations about his biological father, and now this. She met Sarah at a cafe near the office. His adoptive mother seemed to have aged years in a few days. Sarah began, holding her daughter's hands. There's something we should have told you a long time ago. About how you came into our family. Heart racing, Claire listened as Sarah revealed that her adoption hadn't been completely legal. Claire's biological family, the same ones who now surrounded her, had orchestrated everything to hide a scandal. But we love you, Sarah cried. From the first moment you were our daughter. Claire hugged her mother, feeling lost and found at the same time. I know, Mom, I know. Back at the office, Claire found herself in front of a makeshift jury, defending her work and her integrity. With Ethan by her side, she presented irrefutable evidence of her innocence. To his surprise, it was Lisa who rose to his defense in the end. I need to confess something, Lisa said, looking defeated. I was the one who planted the false evidence. At Robert's request. The silence that followed was broken by Ethan. This ends now. Robert will no longer manipulate this family or this company. And that night, alone in her apartment, Claire reflected on everything that had happened. His life had been turned upside down in a matter of weeks. She stroked her belly gently, thinking about the uncertain future that awaited her. A soft knock on the door brought her out of her thoughts. It was Ethan, looking exhausted but determined. Claire, he said softly. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that no matter what happens, I will be here. For you and for our son. Claire looked him in the eyes, seeing sincerity and regret. She didn't know if she could trust him again, but something inside her wanted to try. One day at a time, Ethan, she finally replied. That's all I can promise right now. As Ethan left, Claire felt a twinge of hope. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and secrets yet to be revealed. But for the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could face it all. Claire stared at the piece of paper in her hands, an unusual request from a mysterious client. The project was for a unique necklace, with a design that should incorporate elements of rebirth and hope. Something about that request intrigued her, as if it were more than just a simple job. While sketching the first strokes of the design, Claire reflected on the past few turbulent weeks. Her adoptive mother Sarah's surgery had been a success, but the family's financial worries still weighed heavily on her heart. Claire wished she could help more, especially now that she knew the truth about her adoption. A gentle touch on her shoulder brought her out of her thoughts. It was Ethan, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and hope. "Claire," he said softly, "can we talk?" She nodded, setting the sketch aside. Over the past few days, Ethan had struggled to prove his innocence and regain his trust. Every gesture, every word, seemed to be an attempt to rebuild what had been broken. "I found out more about my uncle's involvement in your father's death," Ethan began, his voice shaking. "I have evidence now, Claire. Enough evidence to bring him to justice." Claire felt a lump in her throat. "And what do you intend to do with this evidence?" Ethan held her hands, his eyes locked on hers. "Whatever you want me to do. This is your story, Claire, your family. It's your decision." At that moment, Claire saw something in Ethan's eyes that reminded her of the man she had fallen in love with. Honest, courageous, willing to face the consequences of their actions. "We need to do the right thing," she said finally. "Not just for me or my father, but for everyone who was affected by your uncle's actions." Ethan nodded, a small smile of relief on his lips. "Together." Claire hesitated for a moment before responding. "Together." In the days that followed, Claire was divided between working on the mysterious necklace and investigating Ethan's uncle's activities. Each new discovery seemed to open a Pandora's box of family and corporate secrets. One night, while working late at the office, Claire received an unexpected visit from Lisa. "Claire," Lisa said, looking nervous, I need to tell you something." Claire raised an eyebrow warily. "What's wrong, Lisa?" Lisa took a deep breath before continuing. "I wasn't completely honest about my involvement with Robert. He blackmailed me too. He threatened to expose my family's secrets if I didn't help him sabotage you and Ethan." The revelation hit Claire like a bolt of lightning. Suddenly, Lisa's actions took on a new context. "Why are you telling me this now?" Claire asked. Lisa wiped away a tear. "Because I'm tired of lying, of hurting people. You and Ethan don't deserve this." In that moment, Claire saw Lisa not as an enemy, but as another victim in Robert's machinations. "What do you know that can help us?" With the information provided by Lisa, Claire and Ethan finally had all the pieces to the puzzle. They decided to confront Robert at a company party where all the key players would be present. The night of the party arrived, the elegantly decorated room contrasting with the tension that hung in the air. Claire, wearing a dress that highlighted her now visible pregnancy, walked in on Ethan's arm. Robert greeted them with a fake smile. "Ah, the happy couple. Claire, you look radiant." Claire forced a smile. "Thank you, Robert. In fact, we'd like to talk to you privately." Before Robert could respond, Lisa appeared, carrying a tray of champagne glasses. A toast to the family business she offered, her gaze meeting Claire's in silent understanding. Robert picked up a glass without noticing the look exchanged between the two women. Claire politely declined, placing her hand over her stomach in a protective gesture. Ethan guided everyone to a private office adjacent to the ballroom. As soon as the door closed, the atmosphere changed drastically. "It's over," Uncle Ethan said, his voice firm. "We know everything. About the embezzlement, about Claire's father, about her blackmail." Robert's face paled. "I don't know what you're talking about, my boy." Claire took a step forward. "Don't insult our intelligence, Robert. We have proof, documents, witnesses. It's all over." Robert looked around like a cornered animal. His eyes landed on Lisa. You traitor." Lisa lifted her chin defiantly. "No, Robert, you are the traitor. You betrayed this family, you betrayed everyone's trust." At that moment, the door opened. Elizabeth, Ethan's mother, entered, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Robert," she said, her voice sharp as ice, "how could you?" Robert staggered, realizing he was completely surrounded. "Elizabeth, I can explain." But Elizabeth raised her hand, silencing him. "No more explanations, no more lies. You will turn yourself in to the authorities and confess everything." The hours that followed were a whirlwind. The police were called, statements were given, and Robert was taken into custody. As chaos unfolded around her, Claire found a moment of stillness with Ethan. "It's over," she whispered, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. Ethan hugged her gently. "Yes, it's over. And now we can start again. If you want." Claire looked into Ethan's eyes, seeing in them the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had lost himself and was now finding his way back. "Yes," she replied softly. "Let's start over. Together." That night, back at the apartment, Claire finally opened the package that contained the mysterious necklace she had designed. Inside, in addition to the necklace, there was a card. For Claire, the card said in Ethan's handwriting, "A symbol of our rebirth and hope for our future together." Claire touched the necklace gently, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. It was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild not just his marriage, but his entire life. With a soft smile, she put on the necklace and looked at her reflection in the mirror. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Claire felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The sun had barely risen when Claire woke up, feeling an uneasiness she couldn't explain. She stroked her now visibly prominent belly, seeking comfort in the gentle movement of her baby. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. "Mommy's just a little nervous today." The phone rang, making Claire jump. It was Ethan, his voice strained on the other end. "Claire, you need to come to the office immediately. Robert, he broke out of house arrest." Claire's world seemed to freeze. "What? How is this possible?" "We don't know yet," Ethan replied, concern evident in his voice. "But the police are on the way. Please, Claire, stay where you are. I'll send someone to get you." Claire hung up the phone, her heart beating fast. She looked around the apartment, suddenly feeling vulnerable. It was then that she noticed the necklace that Ethan had given her. A symbol of her new beginning was not where she had left it the night before. A shiver ran down his spine. Someone had been there. Before he could react, the doorbell rang. Claire cautiously approached the door. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "It's me," Lisa, came the reply. "Ethan sent me to get you." Claire hesitated for a moment before opening the door. Lisa looked pale and scared. "Quickly," Lisa said, pulling Claire by the arm. "We have to go now." As they went down in the elevator, Claire noticed something strange about Lisa's behavior. She seemed nervous, constantly looking at her watch. "Lisa," Claire began, "what's really going on?" Before Lisa could respond, the elevator doors opened in the underground parking lot, and there, standing next to a car, was Robert. "Great work," Lisa, Robert said with a cold smile. "I knew I could count on you." Claire looked at Lisa, shocked. You cheated on me." Lisa looked down, unable to look at Claire. "I'm sorry, Claire. He still has something against my family." Robert approached, holding a familiar object, Claire's necklace. "Looking for this, dear. A beautiful symbol of hope. Too bad hope is for fools." "What do you want?" Robert, Claire asked, trying to remain calm despite the fear that was growing inside her. "Justice," Robert replied, his voice thick with bitterness. "Or rather revenge, against your father, against Ethan, against everyone who tried to destroy me." With a quick movement, Robert grabbed Claire's arm, dragging her towards the car. "Let's take a little trip, Claire, to the place where it all began, and where it will all end." Claire fought, but Robert was stronger. She looked at Lisa, silently begging for help, but the other woman just looked away, tears in her eyes. As Robert drove out of town, Claire tried to stay calm, thinking about her baby, about Ethan, about everything she could lose. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice firmer than she felt. Robert laughed humorlessly. "To the old factory, of course, where your dear father had his accident." Claire's heart skipped a beat. The abandoned factory where his father had died years ago, the place that haunted your nightmares. When they arrived, the sun was already high in the sky. The factory was a decrepit structure, a ghost of its industrial past. Robert dragged Claire inside through dark hallways and rooms filled with rusting machinery. "You know, Claire," Robert said as they walked, "your father was a foolish man. He thought he could change things, make a difference. But in the end, what did that bring him? Death." Claire felt a wave of anger rise within her. "My father was a good, honest man. Something you would never understand." Robert stopped abruptly, turning to face her. His eyes glowed with contained fury. "Honesty? Kindness. These are luxuries, Claire. The world belongs to those who are smart, those who know how to play the game." They arrived at a large room filled with metal beams and heavy machinery. Robert pushed Claire forward, causing her to stumble. "It was here," he said, pointing to a specific spot on the floor. "This is where your father fell, or rather was pushed." Claire felt tears well up in her eyes. Why? Why do this? "Because he was going to ruin everything," Robert shouted, losing his composure. "Years of work, millions in offshore accounts, all gone down the drain because of his sense of justice." At that moment, Claire heard a noise. Steps. Someone was coming. "Claire," Ethan's voice echoed through the factory. "Claire, where are you?" Robert swore under his breath, pulling a gun from his coat. "Looks like we'll have company sooner than I expected." Claire took advantage of the moment of distraction to try to escape, but Robert grabbed her, pressing the gun to her temple. "Don't even think about it," he hissed. Ethan appeared at the entrance to the room, followed by several police officers. His eyes widened as he saw the scene before him. "Let go of her," Robert, Ethan said, his voice shaking slightly. He finished. Robert laughed, a cold, lifeless sound. "Is it over?" "No, my dear nephew. This is just the beginning of the end." What followed was a blur of movement and sound. Claire felt Robert push her forward, heard the deafening sound of a gunshot. She closed her eyes, expecting the pain, but instead she felt strong arms wrap around her. When she opened her eyes, she saw Ethan, his face inches from hers. Behind them, Robert lay on the ground, unarmed and surrounded by police officers. "It's okay now," Ethan whispered, hugging Claire tightly. "It's over. For real this time." The next few hours passed like a hazy dream. Statements were given, Robert was taken into custody, this time with no chance of escape. Claire was examined by doctors, ensuring that she and the baby were fine. When they finally returned home, Claire felt exhausted but strangely at peace. She looked at Ethan, seeing in him the man she had fallen in love with, the man who risked everything to save her. "How did you find me?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled, taking your hand. "Lisa. She called us as soon as Robert forced her to take you. She chose to do the right thing in the end." Claire nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. "And now, what happens?" Ethan knelt before her, taking something out of his pocket, the necklace Robert had stolen. "Now, my love, we start over. If you take me back, I promise to spend every day of my life striving to be the man you deserve." With tears in her eyes, Claire allowed Ethan to place the necklace around her neck. "Yes," she whispered. "Let's start over. Together." Months later, in a small chapel, Claire and Ethan renewed their vows. This time it wasn't a marriage of convenience or social expectations. It was a union based on love, trust, and the promise of a future together. As they exchanged rings, Claire felt her baby move. She smiled, placing Ethan's hand on her belly. "Our family," she said softly. Ethan kissed her forehead. "Our new chance." When they left the chapel, the sun was shining brightly, as if blessing their new beginning. Claire looked at Ethan, at their gathered friends and family, and at the future that opened up before them. She knew the path wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, moments of doubt. But now, with the truth revealed and the past finally put to rest, Claire felt ready to face anything.